topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. My team and I help companies discover and articulate their purpose to thread it through culture and operations. We work with forward-thinking or forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. And we provide programs that enable individual team members and leaders to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. With us today is Dr. Misha Ann Martin, an industrial and organizational psychologist and director of people analytics on the WorkHuman IQ team. We'll be talking today about the state of today's workforce, what people are wanting from their work, and a few key societal trends impacting the workforce today. She joined us today from Denver, Colorado, where she's actually currently escaping the heat of Austin, Texas, which is her home. Dr. Martin, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Right, I am too. I'm so glad to have you. This is going to be such a great conversation. I can't wait to pick your brain. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. It's going to be slightly painful, but let's do it. Okay. So the first thing I want to get into, I'm really convinced of this, that I don't believe that most business leaders today really understand how radically the world of work and employment has shifted over the last couple of years with the pandemic and other changes. So first, what I want to talk about is on your website, on the WorkHuman website, you actually say that employees are demanding humanity in the workplace. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, we all went through the pandemic together, and I don't think you go through something as big and as monumental as that and remain unchanged. And one of the big things that changed in the way of work for many of us is working remotely versus working in the office. And what that meant is no gnarly commutes, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not on the subway with hundreds of your closest friends trying to battle to get to work. You have more time with your family. You can walk to the kitchen and make yourself a meal for lunch. And, I think a lot of us got a taste of what work could be like. I think also because everybody in this position was on camera, it was the great equalizer. You saw everybody's home life, kids were running in, and we got to see human glimpses of our coworkers that we never got before. And I think what we found out and what our research said is that people actually quite like this more balanced work and home life. We've tasted the sweet nectar, and we're not going back. We did a survey about a year and a half ago at WorkHuman asking people, why exactly are you intending to look for work in the next 12 months? And salary was number one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But number two and number three was flexibility and culture. So people are demanding a more human experience in their workplaces more now than before the pandemic.
Okay, so a couple things. So I don't know if you saw that Dr. Klotz of Texas A&M's had actually come out in the beginning of the pandemic, and he said he predicted the Great Resignation. And he said the reason why it's going to showcase how unnatural our work is today.
Exactly.
Right? Fascinating. So let's dig a little bit more deeper into the actual COVID pandemic itself. I'm really interested in that beautiful mind of your perspective on how the experience of going through a pandemic together has actually changed what people want from the workplace.
I think it makes you take stock of your life and what's important. And I don't think that most people would say the job I do and the company I work for is the most important thing in my life.
Right.
And I mean, we all witnessed people or heard of people or know of people who struggled with COVID, long COVID, died from COVID. It has a way of making you stop and really reassess what you want your life to look like. And I think most people realize that, work had a disproportionate place and
Yeah.
we're readjusting as a result. I think it's very natural and I think it's healthy. I think now we're thinking more of our well-being, and so that is a good thing that we're now talking about more than ever before as well.
We were totally aligned on this so far. So one of the other things that I've also been picking up on my reading, and of course these ongoing conversations I have on this little thing called Working on Purpose show, is that before a few years ago, before the pandemic, we really did orchestrate our whole lives around our work. And
Mhm.
today, people want to be able to build a life, build a they want to build a life around their work. So
Mhm.
it's really about anchoring themselves in a life, and work is a part of that, not the center stage. It's fascinating to me.
Yes. It is really fascinating. We told ourselves this big lie that, professional and personal were really different. And we talked about work-life balance, right? Like, how do we
Hmm.
balance these two different things? And now we've shifted our thinking to more work-life harmony and work-life
Yes.
integration because that line was a false line and a false lie that we told ourselves. And we kind of realized this as the pandemic wore on and we were seeing into people's homes and seeing their kids and their pets. And we realized, hey, work still got done, even when my work life and my personal life kind of blended together. And it kind of didn't suck actually. So,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think we're learning, growing, and evolving and getting to a much better and much healthier place where this is concerned.
The couple of things, that one word there that I really love, and that's evolving. And I do
Hmm.
see that what we're doing here, and what people are demanding from work, is allowing us to evolve as a planet,
Yes,
as a way of doing work in the world. And I'm championing that. I know you are too.
I am.
And I think what's helping that cause to be heard and to be responded to is this phenomenon called the Great Resignation. It really
Yes,
is real.
yes.
So I have a few clients that are just they're pulling their hair out, going, Elise, you got to help us through this. So
Hmm.
let's talk about that. I'd love to hear your perspective or research and what you see is driving the Great Resignation. What's happening there from your
Yeah,
perspective?
so when things change, it is normal for some companies to get on board quicker than others, right? So as we did more flexible work and we realized that this could actually work, there are companies who embraced it, allowed it, moved forward in that fashion. What that does is it creates a choice for people. So if you want more flexibility, as our research is saying people do, then you have now the ability to choose a culture that includes that. When you're going through tough things, people show their mettle, right? You have the leaders that was just concerned about the work being done. And then you had the leaders that rose to the occasion and really asked people about how are you doing? Took that as an opportunity to say, you know what, I kind of care about you as a whole person. I understand that you have kids in the house and that daycare is closed and that you're doing this virtual learning thing. I'm willing to give you whatever support you need to handle that and handle work. And, when you know that some people are experiencing that and it is possible, but you're not, what are you going to do? You're going to go and look for a culture that is better and more supportive because you know that it's out there. So I
Mhm.
think now that, people have had a taste of that kind of thing, now they're choosing what's best for them because now there are more options for that out there.
Mhm. I think that's extremely well said. And by the way, I love how articulate you are. I'm a sucker being articulate. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So another thing that I've discovered that's also behind the whole Great Resignation, which is really something that needs to be addressed. And you mentioned the well-being piece, and that's burnout,
Mhm.
right? People were quitting their
Yes.
jobs because they were
Yes.
so burnt out without even having a job secured. I'm out of
Yes.
here. See ya later. And I
Yeah.
think the very fact that the Gallup organization pivoted from years, decades focus on employee engagement to well-being during the
Mhm.
pandemic is extremely indicative.
Yeah. So in our research at WorkHuman, we found 60% of our sample reported elevated levels of burnout. But we did find that when people were in a culture where they felt appreciated and seen, that burnout comes down significantly. That
Mhm.
stress reduces significantly. The other thing I want to bring into the conversation is the idea of microaggressions, and I've talked
Yeah.
about this before. For people of color especially, and women who were in toxic workplaces, um, the ability to work from home kind of gave an escape from that. You
Mm.
got the
Mm.
opportunity to take off the mask and not deal with all the microaggressions that you are dealing with in the workplace. Who wants to go back to that? No one. Absolutely no one.
Mm. Extremely interesting point. Wow. We're going to talk more again about some of those societal trends in the last segment. So I appreciate that you kind of teased that up. Now, for this next bit here, this is where it gets really interesting. As I've had a few conversations with people that I'm working with, these are clients who
Hmm.
have actually very smugly said to me, "Well, Elise, all this, hoopla that we're having to go through to be able to address the employees today and make them happy and make them keep them happy, wanting to stay, it will all be unnecessary when the economy changes and we move more into a recession."
Hmm.
And my first thought was, why would you want to, reduce your evolution in the first place? Why would you want to go
Yeah.
back to an earlier unevolved state? That's my first thing. But then more interestingly, you say you've supplied some features, you and your team let me know that you think that's completely false. So I want
Yes.
to talk a little bit about why you say that's false. I do have some stats here that we can talk about, but first, why do you think that's an erroneous stance?
So there are a couple of things here. So number one, if your competition is offering a better culture, which people are saying that they want, one where people are appreciated, one where you feel seen, one where you're psychologically safe, one where you feel like people are valued despite their background, their nationality, where they come from, their gender. People are going to choose that over
Mhm.
your organization.
Yeah.
Now, to play devil's advocate, let's say that some of these naysayers are saying, okay, a recession is coming. People are no longer going to feel comfortable, jumping ship, right? And that may or may not be true. We're seeing some things that um, suggest that people might want to start hunkering down. However, that doesn't mean that you're done and that you don't have to do anything, because these things that we're talking about as cultural energizers are the things that make people productive. So, actually, if you have somebody in your workplace that's not engaged, the best thing they can do is leave. It's actually
Right.
worse for them to stay and not be productive and be negative and cynical. So you lose either way by not providing this type of environment that people can thrive in and that people want to stay
Extremely well said and well argued.
in.
So one of the other things that your team conveyed to me is, this idea of, that we're going to leave the position that the employees clearly have the say in the workforce and go back, and that we'll never be able to go back where employers have the power over workers. And you say,
Mhm.
in fact, 31.2% of the workers surveyed said they wouldn't sacrifice anything to keep their job during an economic downturn. That's a pretty big number.
That is a big number. That is a big number. We also have to remember, that we're thinking about this in terms of, you competing with your competitor, in whatever you do for talent. But now we have this whole gig economy. There are
Right.
all these different ways that people, can make money nowadays. When people lost their jobs during the pandemic because they went away. So think, waiters, waitresses, a lot of people pivoted and they still survived. So Now you're not only competing with companies that do what you do or hire the same talent that, you're hiring, but you're competing with this gig economy that is becoming increasingly prevalent as well.
Hmm. Fascinating. And then there was another stat too that said that of those surveyed, 10% would give up hybrid or remote work, and another 5.5% would temporarily cut their salary. But so there's some things that they would do. But what I really got from the research that your team provided me is that, to your point, they have choices. They can vote with
Exactly.
their feet, and I think this is just so great for us to reinforce with these companies that are very smug about this thing and
Mhm.
arms folded, like I'm almost off duty, at least I don't have to worry about this anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. You're wrong. They're wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry. We'll help you. We'll be there to save you. Don't worry. On that note, let's grab our first break. I'm your host,
Okay.
Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Misha Ann Martin, an industrial and organizational psychologist and director of people analytics on the WorkHuman IQ team. We've been talking a bit about today's reality in the workforce. After the break, we're going to get more into what the workforce really wants in their work and what you can do to keep
Mhm.
them working along your side. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the program. Before we get back in with our guest, I want to invite you to check out a book that I published in August, or actually it was November of 2020. It's called Purpose Ignited. And I wrote the book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming an inspirational leader. And it's the basis of my leadership program. So I hope you'll check it out. If you are just joining the program, my guest is Dr. Misha Ann Martin, an industrial and organizational psychologist and director of people analytics on the WorkHuman IQ team. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this segment here, Dr. Martin, I want to talk about I want to help our listeners and viewers really get into the hearts and minds of their workers, what it is they really,
Mhm.
really want. And I said in the last segment, that I've this whole notion of, and certainly I'm very intrigued with this change or this emerging trend that prior to COVID, people arranged their lives around their work. And of course, today they strive to arrange their work around their lives. And it's been really interesting, some of the conversations I've been having with guests about that. But what is your perspective on what that really means to arrange one's work around their lives?
So you want your work to fit into the other things that are important in your life and not sacrifice the things that you want to do for work. So we want to, work to live, not live to work.
Yeah. So one of the things I've had a few guests talking about that, I had Dr. Linda Grattan with the London School of Business talking about the redesign of work and just a really interesting conversation.
Mhm.
And she said, what we're looking for, people want, get this, things like they want to be able to get enough sleep. They want to be able
Yeah.
to exercise. They want to
Yep.
be able to see their important relationships, where again, previous times, I think a lot of those things were um, they were lost at the expense of the work. And so people do want to
Exactly.
be able to pop into their yoga class on Thursday morning before they go to work, kind of thing. So I think when we can, if listeners and viewers, if we can really provide that flexibility, that harmony that Dr. Martin was talking about, people will get their work done, but they want to be able to take care of themselves at the same time. I think this is just so important. Major shift as far as I could tell.
I want to challenge ourselves to think differently about everything we've thought about work so far. Why can't I have a hair appointment in the middle of the day at 3 p.m. if I'm getting my work done? Why does my work have to be done between 9 to 5? If there is a webinar I want to listen to, why can't I listen to it in the pedicure chair? Like, does that make me any less professional, or does that make me efficient and smart? We need to throw away all these old ideas of what it means to work and just focus on the output. There are many different ways to get the output that you're looking for. So as long as you're clear about the priorities and what you want people to accomplish, then let go and give them the space to do that in a way that best fits their life.
Amen, sister. So I'm working on another book, which is due out next spring, and I'm talking about this, how to actually create these workplaces, and then instead of focusing on presence, focus on
Right.
productivity. Right? It's not
Exactly.
about the presence, it's about what does this person actually accomplish. And if you can give
Hmm.
them that full, beautiful life, guess what? When the recruiter calls, they're less likely to say, yeah, tell me about that job.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you said something in the last segment that I want to dive more deeply into to really help our listeners and viewers understand this phenomenon that's going on here. So you've said that we're in an unusual labor market today with lots of different options beyond just 9 to 5.
Hmm.
And so you even said in another stat that I got from your site that people are willing to supplement their work with these other things that they can actually do. So
Hmm.
tell us more about these options. What do they look like? What else is available to people?
Well, you have things like Uber, DoorDash. I remember when I lived in Memphis, my landscaper was a previous bartender, and
Mm-hmm.
he just turned something that, was a passion of his into his new career. And now he's back to bartending, but he's doing it on his own terms, and that is his supplementary and not his primary. You have things now like Etsy, right, where people can turn their personal passions and talents, like, I don't know, sewing baby blankets into a business and make money from it. The options that people have are so much different than the options they had, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Mhm. It seems like even 5 years ago, the options are different
Yes.
from 5 years
Hmm.
ago. So, what I'm wondering then, in terms of just kind of, is this both an evolution of technology? Is it people getting more creative as they went through the pandemic? This just seems like there's an increased sense of agency and entrepreneurship going on, it seems.
Yeah. Well, not to sound like a fogey, but the internet, right? So now, instead of, having the ability to reach customers in your neighborhood, the internet means that if you produce something, you can have customers all over the world
Mhm.
very, very easily. I think also for a lot of people, the pandemic made us more creative. So
Mm.
many, because out of challenge and struggles, that does propel innovation. I know somebody who started a press-on nail business, a body butter business, quit her job, and now she has a store.
Wow.
When things happen, I mean, the human spirit is undefeated. Like, we know how to make it work, and we know how to adjust and evolve, and we do, and we have.
Mm. Again, you're speaking words that are music to my heart. As an organizational logotherapist, Dr. Viktor Frankl's work, right? I certainly understand the power of the human spirit, and so all the more, ladies and gentlemen, listeners and viewers, being able to activate that, being able to give people where they feel like they can come fully to work and express themselves, and gosh, there's such an opportunity to dance at work, and so many people don't
Yes.
experience it that way.
Yeah. But when you
Yeah.
do, it changes your whole entire life. This was one of my favorite findings from the combined Gallup and WorkHuman research, is that when people feel appreciated in the right ways at work, it makes their entire lives better. And this is especially true for people of color who
Mm.
need, that life boost the most, because we just frankly have more challenges. It
Mm.
improves your entire life.
Hmm. Dr. Martin, I work with several leaders inside organizations, and I was just talking with one of them last week, and she said, Elise, I'm just so in my jam at work. And I said, and tell me how that translates to everyone else in your life. And she stopped and she thought about it for a second. She goes, oh my gosh, I'm having interesting, connected conversations with my husband. I'm not yelling at
Yes.
my kids.
Yes.
I'm taking my dog for a walk. So
Yes.
you think about the ripple effect when we're really fully engaged and
Oh,
enjoying work and
yeah.
it's feeding us versus pulling the life out of us. What a
Yeah.
difference it makes.
When I'm super engaged at work, I am solving problems in the shower before I log on to my
Absolutely.
computer. I'm having dreams about conversation, not in a bad way, right? But like at one point, I kept a notebook under my bed because I was like, oh, I don't want to lose this. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and scribble it down. It totally energizes you and enriches your whole life.
Hmm. Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think the world of work is such a profoundly important, critical part of life to get right. So, of course, that's
Absolutely.
what I'm standing for, is to help more companies do that. So we talked before about flexibility being important, but I also
Hmm.
want to hear, what else do people really, really want in their
Yeah. So
work
people
situation?
people want a positive culture. So I want to break down a few elements of what that means. So they want to feel appreciated. They want to know that even if the organization is 200,000 people, somebody sees me, my
Yeah.
full and authentic self, and appreciates what I bring to the table. They want to be psychologically safe. They want to feel like they don't have to wear a mask in order to belong, and they want to feel empowered to speak up with their ideas. They want great leadership. So often we forget that the relationship between an employee and their direct report is the foundation of how they experience the organization. They want a
Yeah.
leader that cares about them as whole people and checks in on the whole person and not just on the tasks that the person is hired to do. You know, we want coworkers that we like to work with. We want work to be a community, and all of that is possible. And people are disproportionately choosing organizations that provide these things over organizations that do not.
Beautifully said. Oh, just yummy. Um, just like when I talk with people, I ask them, what do you really want to do in your next role? I also ask them, what would make you want to poke your eyeballs out? What do you just hate doing? So now I want to turn that same question that we just did here. I ask you, what does the workforce want? And you gave that beautiful answer. So
Yeah.
now the question is, what will they simply not tolerate now?
So I think now that we've tasted the nectar of what could be, people are not going to tolerate toxic cultures and micromanaging leadership. They're going to opt for more supportive environments. They're not, I've seen a couple of examples in the media where organizations are dictating what they want for people. And some are dictating, you know, like full time in the office.
Yep.
Some are dictating the specific days. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I just feel like we need to shift from that. We're still talking about what the organization needs from people. If we shifted our thinking to, okay, what do people need from the organization? And then be clear with people about, what we need them to deliver for the organization, then we can just step back and let people deliver it in the best way they can. Beautiful things happen. Like if you just focus on the person and provide clarity, that's all we need to do. We
Hmm.
don't need to micromanage. We don't need to dictate the when and the how. We just need to let people shine.
Oh, this is so great. You and I could spend a lot of time talking. So one of the things I'm very convinced of, and I think you just illustrated in that, what you just made in that point there, Dr. Martin, and that is that I'm firmly convinced that most organizations operate so much lower in productivity than they have to
Oh,
or could,
yes.
because people are not, they're being restrained.
Yes.
They're told to do things like this,
Hmm.
color inside the lines, just color this box kind of thing. Instead of, you got out of their way and let them really bring their game. You'd be
Hmm.
amazed at what a human being can do when they're unleashed on fire, working with passion, living on purpose. I mean, come on, right? It's just be let's make that world come true, can we?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So absolutely. So Google did this research on psychological safety and basically found that the most, effective teams were the ones that were psychologically safe, despite all the amazing talent
Yeah.
that Google hires and all the effort they put in to hire talented people. They found it was not who was on the team, but how the team operated. However, when we WorkHuman did our research on psychological safety is not that high in organizations.
Right.
The average we found on a scale of 1 to 5 was only 3.47. And it was lower for women, lower for parents, and lower for anyone who isn't white. So when you think about all that untapped potential
Yeah.
and all the research linking psychological safety to team productivity, innovation, safety, oh yeah, we're definitely leaving productivity on the table for sure.
I think we've convinced our listeners of this. So I had a few weeks ago, I had Bharav Bhatnagar on my show. He wrote a book, co-author book called Unfear. And they're talking
Mhm.
about, these various fear archetypes that are all over inside organizations. Makes it so accessible for people to understand. If you don't believe that you have fear in your organization, you really are wrong. It's just a question of what
Absolutely.
form is it taking and how bad is it, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So since many listeners to the show really are trying to work on their leadership here, you said before that people want leaders who see them as unique individual human
Yes.
beings. What else do they want in their leaders?
Oh my gosh, I'm so passionate about this, and I'm so glad that you asked the question. So, in our research, we've asked questions about frequency of check-in. So, one of the most important things you can do as a leader is check in frequently, and we recommend once a week. However, how you check in is important. And I've coined a term that I call the generous check-in, right? Like not just checking in about, what people do, but how they're doing. And what that means is asking that question authentically. How are you doing?
Mhm.
And shutting up, listening to the answer, asking follow-up questions. However, you can't go in cold, right? You can't demand vulnerability from someone if you haven't modeled that behavior yourself as a leader. And so that requires you to be vulnerable yourself. If you've made a mistake, say that. If you're not sure, say that. If you're stressed out, oh, say that too. You know, um, I also do this thing with my direct reports that I've done for years based on research that I've done in a previous organization that showed that one of the survey questions that was the best predictor of turnover intent was a question about your leader knowing what kind of barriers you're facing. And so
Mm.
that was a big eye opener for me. And so I started doing what I call best of worst of. So I asked my team members, what was the best thing that happened to you since the last time we spoke? What was the worst thing that happened to you? And
Mm.
then for fun, what was the best thing you ate? Now, they can tell me the best thing that happened at work or the best thing that happened in life. It's their choice. And what I've noticed is that, at the beginning of the relationship, my direct reports start to tell me about the best of worst of where work is concerned, which is very, very helpful. But as our relationship evolves, they start to tell me about personal stuff too. And that gives me the opportunity to be empathetic and to provide some extra grace and support when needed. And in my experience, people will reciprocate tenfold when you give them the support that they need.
Mhm. I'll come work for you. Have any openings? Be thrilled to be on your team. All right, let's grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Dr. Mishan Martin, who is an industrial and organizational psychologist and the director of people analytics on the WorkHuman IQ team. We've been talking about what the workforce really wants in their work today. After the break, we're going to get more granular on some of the key societal trends that are impacting the workplace. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. One other announcement before we get back in with Dr. Martin is I want to share that in August of last year, I released a second book. It's called Passionately Striving and Why. What that is it's a collection of 25 stories from women around the world that I scouted for, and they are sharing their most intimate stories of how they discovered their purpose. all the ins and outs, the twists and turns, and how they're serving from it today. So it's designed to be one part educational and one part inspirational. So I hope you'll check that out. If you're looking for purpose, that may be able to help you find it. If you're just joining the program today, my guest is Dr. Mishan Martin. She is an industrial and organizational psychologist and director of people analytics on the WorkHuman IQ team. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this last bit, as I mentioned, I like to be able to, as a social scientist, I can't help but talking about some of these really big trends. And you've alluded to a couple already, but I did notice when I was looking at what you're doing and what you're up to, that you are about to moderate a panel or a discussion interviewing 3 experts in late August on racism and the allyship in the America and the workplace. So I already know that you have clearly a body of research around this. What do you hope to impart to the listenership with that?
So actually, that conversation already happened at WorkHuman Live, and what you're seeing is the rebroadcast of that. WorkHuman asked me to moderate this panel that included our anti-racism facilitator, Dwayne Richards, head of diversity and inclusion at Netflix, Renee Myers, and Dr. Bernice King. Yes, that King.
Wow.
And
wow, I got goosebumps.
I know, right? And I said, I've never done anything like this before. Are you sure you want me to do this? And they said, yes, absolutely. Your team is producing the defining research on our behalf in this area. We absolutely want you to do this. So, being a human being and wanting to have control of things and do them well, I came up with a whole plan for the conversation. I wanted to talk about, awareness, action, allyship, and accountability. And the conversation does follow those 4 chapters loosely. However, then the Buffalo shooting happened, and I was not at all okay. I was not at all okay. I remember texting my leader and saying, I'm not even sure I can do this. I don't think I can get up on a stage in front of all these people and do this. And it turns out that I did, but I had to do away with the script. I said, there's no way I'm pretending that I'm okay or that this isn't happening. And so I just kind of chucked the plan in a way. And I started out by telling the entire audience, hey, I'm not okay. I am not okay. And started the panel with asking the panelists the same question, basically, given the current events, how were they doing? And it started out real raw. And I think starting out with that vulnerability and that admission really set the stage for this raw conversation. And, the people that were in the room, I could see it on their faces. We're witnessing something that was really important. And some of the most powerful feedback we got was from people who said, hey, because of that conversation, I went home and I spoke to my family. I spoke to my coworkers, Black people in my workplace. I really connected with them and asked how they were doing. I led a conversation about this with everyone. And so I'm just so thrilled that we're re-releasing it in this format. And so that more people will get to witness that conversation and they will move forward and take actions that will transform their companies and whichever communities they're a part of. So I'm so excited about it.
Oh, I can't wait to watch it or listen to it. I can't wait. I think that sounds like an incredible way to really surface a really powerful topic. And I'm part of the reason I wanted you to speak to that is that and I've said this before on air in my various posts. I'll just say it directly. If you're not a person of color, you do not understand racism. You do not get it. You do not understand how debilitating it really is. And you can say, oh yeah, I've got this nice compliment of all these interesting friends. But if you're not in it, if you didn't experience it, you just don't get it, which is why the allyship is so important. Yes?
Yes. And that's why it was also important for us to start with that foundation of awareness. And so I do expect people to walk away knowing things that they didn't know before. I expect them to walk away with specific actions that they can take to be an ally, and with ideas around how they can hold themselves accountable for change, and also the people around them, the organizations they're a part of, and the communities they're a part of as well.
Beautiful. It's so important. I really, one of the things I got present to during the pandemic is I really got present to, we really are in this together.
Yes.
And we can do this together stuff so much better.
Yes, yes. We're in this together, but some of us are experiencing it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
that's the part about doing it better. Yeah.
Right.
So another trend, which you've already alluded to already, but I want to dig more deeply into, is this whole mental health and
Yes.
well-being, right? I mean,
Mm.
gosh, during the pandemic, I was watching as more and more executives were like concerned about the mental health and well-being of their
Mhm.
people. And of course, that's something that my work also addresses around meaning and
Mhm.
purpose. So also interested in your perspective, what are you seeing companies doing to support mental health and well-being?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that seems like a small thing, but is really important is that, the term well-being has entered our lexicon. And
Yes.
so what that has done is us normalize us talking about it and further break down these barriers between personal and professional. Because guess what? That whole person is walking into work, either literally or metaphorically, right? And if that whole person is not okay, then that job is not getting done well. So the fact that it's now entered our lexicon and made it more okay for us to have the conversation, I see that more, and I see that as a positive. Also, from our clients at WorkHuman, I've seen a lot more clients interested in our well-being research. WorkHuman, we've been looking at well-being topics for a very long time. We looked at stress and burnout in 2019 and found that the people that were the least stressed were the people that were most recently recognized. We
Mhm.
replicated that finding during the pandemic, one of the toughest times of our lives, and found the exact same thing. And now we're having clients that are interested in working with us on this same type of research as well. We've got lots of healthcare clients, and they had a really rough time, and they still are, right? And
Mhm.
so it is my honor to help these companies come up with evidence-based ways to help people live their lives better.
Mhm. Such important work, right? I'm just so grateful that I know of you. Who knows? There's probably some ways to collaborate and do something together here, but I really believe in what you're doing. And I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
the research perspective that you bring. We're not talking about shooting from the hip here. We're talking about
Mhm.
research. And that's just, well, I think that's just a fantastic thing to talk about. It's exciting and stimulating for me, and I hope it is for our listeners and viewers. We talked before, Nishan, about this notion of focusing on presence over or productivity over presence, and I think
Yes.
that's just so important. And I know this is really hard, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is hard for you, and I can tell you why it's hard
Mhm.
for you. And part of it comes down to a five-letter word called trust. If you don't
Yes.
see people, you don't believe they're working. So,
Mhm.
so my question to you is, how can we help companies to incentivize productivity over presence, especially in the remote work environment?
Yeah, so, the first part of my answer might come off as a little unusual, but I think the first thing that is important is clarity. What am I expected to accomplish in my role? What
Mm,
are my priorities? Because then now I know, okay, this is what you expect from me. And then once you start with that foundation, then you can give feedback on the how I'm accomplishing and the what I'm accomplishing. And the focus on those things mean that you don't have to focus on all the other things that are not important because you're getting the outcome for the goal that you set. And so I think having those foundational items in place actually makes it easier to let go of those things that don't matter. But when you don't have that clarity around what somebody needs to accomplish, then you're like, what am I supposed to do as a leader? I know I'm supposed to track something. And so I think as human beings, we default to hours and presence, in the absence of that clarity.
okay, so this is awesome. So the opportunity then for leaders is to be able to first really develop a very clear understanding of what work needs to be done in the organization.
Yes.
Really take a lay of the land, and then communicate that effectively, clearly to people. All this
Mhm.
takes work. So I had another woman on the show, Catherine Matiski. She wrote about supporting virtual teams in COVID. And she talks about how important it is to be able to really elevate your communication
Mhm.
skills, to be able to effectively manage a remote team. So
Mhm.
you just said it beautifully there. So this goes back to elevation and elevation and what's our other word? Evolution, right? So
Yes.
this is the opportunity. How exciting.
Yeah.
Imagine.
I also like a process that I've been using for pretty much the entirety of my career that I call the Nirvana approach. So, for a direct report, one of the things you can ask your leader is, if I was completely successful in my role, if I just blew this out of the water, what would that look like? Because maybe your leader does need help communicating to
Mhm,
you what it
mhm.
is you want to accomplish. And guess what? When you have that conversation, I bet Nirvana doesn't look like 60 hours a week or being there from 9 to 5. Like, it might look like being available during a core set of hours, like if you're, front facing or something like that. But just asking that question might help both parties get to the meat of, what success looks like in that particular role.
Such a great point, and actually very generous point, right? Because all of us have strengths, and sometimes some of us are not great at communicating, not being able to
Hmm.
really fully articulate or clearly articulate what needs to be done, better at showing, right?
Yes.
And then actually communicating. Such a great point. So if we can help them by asking, what does Nirvana look like? That's gorgeous. I love that idea. What you've also done too, which is great, which I like to do in the show, is to both educate and inspire, but also give them tools they can immediately put to use. And that's one they can immediately put to use.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're coming close to the end here. So let me ask you two more questions here. I want to,
Okay.
I'm very interested from the generational perspective, Gen Y and Gen Z. So Gen Y is also, of course, called the millennial. They are the
Mhm.
youngest in the workforce and about to fully overtake the majority. I'm wondering how you see, how are the values of these two organizations changing the face of the workforce?
Yeah, so we find some really interesting things in our research. So, what we tend to see is that expectations are different, but impact is not different.
Mm.
So, just taking it to, appreciation, which is what we study the most, what we find is that those generations have more of an expectation that that will be part of the workplace. Um, the older generation seem to have this mindset that, hey, they grew up in a different time, right? Like, you go to work for a paycheck and you're just working to live. The newer generation has a new mindset. However, we find that when these expectations of these younger generations are met, it has the same impact on every generation, regardless of what their expectations are. So everybody wants to be treated well. Everybody thrives in a culture that is positive and supportive.
Mhm. Back to elevation and evolving, right? It's just
Yes,
the younger generations are helping to elevate us, and we can
absolutely.
learn from them. It's just so beautiful. So here we are. We've managed to get through the whole show already. It goes by so fast, and the show is listened to by people across the world. They care about creating a workplace where people actually want to come to work and do their best. We create those inspirational leaders that lead them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with today?
I want to leave us with, let's go forward and not backward. We've made all this progress um, regarding the world of work and making it more positive for so many people. So let's remember the foundation of the relationship between an individual and their leader. Let's remember the power of psychological safety, and let's move forward in that same vein instead of going backwards, because businesses will thrive and individuals will thrive and the world would be better for it.
I am completely aligned with that, and I'm willing to go with you lock and step for this. Dr. Martin, thank you so much for being a guest on the Working Purpose Show. It has just been a delight to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, wonderful. You have to come back sometime.
Would love
Li-
to.
Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Dr. Misha Ann Martin and the work she and team do at WorkHuman IQ, just go to workhuman.com. It's an easy place to start. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with doing a special showcase of Tiago Forte's new book called Building a Second Brain, a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. He has created a fascinating system, and one that I'll be using to more quickly and efficiently write my next book, and something that you can use to unleash the creativity and innovation in your teams. Next week, we'll be on the air with Bill George, who is the co-author of True North, Emerging Leader Edition, talking about the leadership concepts in the book and his many own years of executive level leadership and what they've taught him. See you there. Remember that work is an integral and important part of our lives and can be one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.